When you think of NASA, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Space? Rocket launches? Maybe it's the footage of the astronauts on the moon.
I was strolling on the moon one day in a merry, merry month of December. Now, May. Boy, do I like to run up here. I feel like Bugs Bunny.
For most people, that's as far as it tends to go. People know the moon landing, and others know what they believe about the moon landing. Overall, the general consensus is that NASA handles space-related things. So what if I told you that NASA does way more than that? In fact, I'm willing to bet the items you interact with every day can be traced back to NASA. For starters, the device you're watching this on right now has been vastly improved by NASA. And before you ask, yes, you smart fridge YouTube watchers are included in this statistic. But before we can get into what they've done, we need to look at who NASA is. NASA stands for the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, and it was originally founded to compete with the USSR in the space race. This began in 1955, with NASA being formed in 1957. However, as a species, our fascination with space goes back even further. In fact, we have found artifacts from ancient humans that seem to showcase this fascination with space. In one of these artifacts, there is what appears to be the star constellation of Orion, carved into a mammoth tusk. Jumping ahead in the timeline, the ancient Greeks studied the night sky to create calendars based on the stars and lunar cycles. This actually isn't the earliest known calendar either. In Warrenfield, Scotland, there is a Mesolithic monolith from 8000 BC which tracked the phases of the moon to help hunter-gatherers in their efforts. Skipping ahead even further, the Age of Enlightenment is where things really get moving in terms of space fascination. This is where models of our solar system were created, theories began to be tested to help us better understand our universe, and planets became easier to observe thanks to telescopes advancing. It's pretty safe to say that the momentum after this never stopped. In fact, it carried forward and was built up upon until we reached the Cold War after World War I and II. For those of you who don't know, the Cold War was a conflict between the Soviet Union and the USA. It became one of the biggest arms races in terms of documented history. After World War II, both countries possessed nuclear weapons, and they kept improving them. This was until the Soviet Union unleashed and tested Tsar Bomba in Russia. Although we do have bombs that are theoretically more capable, after Tsar Bomba was tested, a treaty was reached. The situation was tense, to say the least. But thankfully, it never heated up into full-scale combat between the two. Nestled inside this war is the space race. The space race was originally a missile rocket competition between the two. Eventually, the competition went from missile rockets to rockets in general, and then, to not be one-upped by each other, it turned into who could come out on top in terms of space flight capabilities. This competition lasted nearly 2 decades, beginning in the August of 1955 and ending in July of 1975. As mentioned earlier, inside this space race was where NASA was born. This competition was very public, but it ended in a way you might not expect. The space race did not end with America putting their flag on the moon during the Apollo 11 mission, but instead it ended with collaboration. The Apollo-Soyuz test project was the first internationally crewed space mission, and it was a joint effort between the USSR and the USA. In fact, millions of people watched on their televisions as the American Apollo spacecraft docked with the Soviet Soyuz spacecraft. The end of this 20-year-long competition could have just been America reaching the moon, but instead, it was a collaboration and a celebration of humanity as a whole. Every organization has a motto, just like every person has their own beliefs, and this is true with NASA. NASA's motto is, for the benefit of all, and this fits them very well. After all, Neil Armstrong's famous line during the moon landing is not, "one small step for America," but instead,
"That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind."
People change over time, and that's true with organizations as well. But to this day, NASA still lives up to their motto. In fact, I would say they live up to this even better than they did back then, because in the age of the internet, you can do a lot more. In fact, on NASA's website, they continue to package up and publish discoveries and information that you can access anywhere in the world for free. I'm sure all of us watching this at one point have hit a paywall on the internet when trying to read an article or watch a video or just trying to learn about something. But that is never something you will deal with NASA. NASA continues to publish their information for free and available to access anywhere in the world in different languages. As a species, we can do amazing things when we put our egos aside and all come together. The Apollo-Soyuz test project is proof of that, and that happened at the height of the Cold War. That test project occurred in 1975, but the Cold War itself didn't come to an end until December 27th of 1991. But because egos were left aside, that did not stop the USSR and the USA from coming together in this moment of extreme tension and ending the space race with a collaboration and celebration of humanity. Apollo 11 wasn't the only time NASA would put people on the moon either. In fact, we went back 5 times in 3 years in Apollo missions 12, 14, 15, 16, and 17. The best part about this is when we learn something about space, it tends to help us better understand life here on Earth. In turn, when we develop something for use in space, it gets adapted for use on Earth in our daily lives. This isn't some uncommon occurrence either, and the list goes on and on. For example, laptops were vastly improved by NASA for the Apollo missions, and omega-3 fatty acid that's in 90% of baby formulas now was discovered by NASA-funded research. And the shock absorption technology that's in the lunar landing vehicles has been adapted for use in prosthetic limbs. While the contributions we're going to be looking at today are purely technical, we can't ignore the financial contributions that NASA has made. In 2023, NASA was granted a budget of $25.3 billion USD. And that sounds like a lot of money. Now, how much of that money do you think was returned to the economy by NASA? 1 billion? Perhaps 5 or 10 billion? Maybe 15 if we're lucky? All of those are very valid guesses, but they come short of the truth in every aspect. In 2023, NASA generated over $75.6 billion in total economic output, while operating with only 0.5 of the national federal budget for that year. And with all climate and Moon to Mars research included, NASA provided a nearly 3-to-1 return on the government's investment across all 50 states and Washington, D.C. To put that into perspective, for every $1 NASA received that year, they gave back $3 to $4.
I'm here in Dayton, Ohio at the Museum of the National Air Force, but I'm not just here for any reason. In this section of the video, we're going to be talking about a few of the contributions NASA has made to your everyday life. I'll even take it one step further because inside, we're going to be standing next to the space origin points of these contributions as we're talking about them. Now, before we go inside, I do want to talk about and compare the differences between technology back then and technology now. When computers first came around, they were the size of a room, and they had a fraction of the computing power of even the worst smartphone on the market. Let's compare that to the laptops we have nowadays. Laptops now are small, they're compact, they're sleek, they're powerful, and those laptops vastly outclass those computers and the technology they used in the Apollo missions. During the Apollo missions, the technology they were using is groundbreaking, but it's now vastly outclassed by your smartphone.
To truly understand how significant the difference is, I should explain 2 acronyms, RAM and ROM. RAM stands for Random Access Memory, and it allows for short-term memory storage. For example, this would be like your currently opened apps on your phone, and that text message that you meant to hit send on before opening YouTube and finding this video. ROM, on the other hand, is read-only memory. This is more permanent, like a video game cartridge or the software that runs your phone. As the Apollo guidance computer was in fact a computer, it had a processor as well. The ROM it possessed was 72 kilobytes. And the RAM it had for use was just over 4 kilobytes. Its processor functioned at 0.043 megahertz.
Now, let's compare that to the technology of my very own iPhone. I have the iPhone 12 Pro, which is admittedly 5 years old and a bit outdated, but let's take a look at the specs. It has 6 gigabytes of RAM, 128 gigabytes of ROM, and a processor speed of 3.1 gigahertz. That means my admittedly outdated iPhone has approximately 128 million times more ROM, 6 million times more RAM, and 3,100 times more processing power than the Apollo 11 computers, all able to fit in my pocket.
Admittedly, this fact is probably obvious. After all, technology has only been improving exponentially since then. In fact, a single Google search uses more computational power than any of the Apollo missions if you factor in the servers accessed in this process. To really put it into perspective, let's compare it to something far more mundane in most people's eyes. If you're in middle school or high school, you probably recognize the TI-84 calculator. If not, then all you need to know that this is an advanced graphing calculator. This calculator also possesses RAM and ROM. It has 128 kilobytes of ROM, 1 megabyte of RAM, and a processing speed of 15 megahertz. That gives this graphing calculator that you've probably used or currently use 32 times more RAM, more than 14,500 times more ROM, and is 350 times faster than the Apollo 11 computers.
Yet, despite this, we were able to put humanity on the moon 6 times in 3 years. In the Apollo missions 11 through 17, we put humanity back on the moon 6 times where we learned more and more. Not Apollo 13 though, that one had an oxygen tank explode, but everybody did survive, so it's okay. We did continue successfully afterwards, though. The Apollo missions themselves were a massive success, and that only led to public support for more. And in 1981, NASA would begin including cameras on the space shuttles themselves, which then was a massive step up from just the cameras that they would take with them, set up on the moon's surface on a tripod, and document lunar activity. This is actually where your smartphone camera comes from. That's right, your smartphone camera was originally designed for space.
However, the camera your smartphone possesses was far from the first camera ever brought into space. Of course, there are the 70mm cameras that were heavily modified for use on the surface of the moon when we landed there, but those had to be set up on tripods. It wasn't until 1981 that cameras for photography were being implemented on the space shuttles themselves. In the following year, 1982, NASA would begin capturing video from the space shuttles using IMAX cameras. The footage consisted of crew life and the views from the Earth through the windows. Our capturing of the Earth would improve once again in 1984 with specialized mapping techniques. With these techniques, we were able to get high-fidelity images of Earth at a 1 to 50,000 scale. 6 years later, in 1990, NASA would switch towards digital cameras, and it is here that your phone camera got its start. These cameras took the form of CCDs and CMOs. CCD stands for Charge Coupled Device, and CMOs stands for Complementary Metal Oxide Semiconductors. Both were used for capturing images, with CCD being the one primarily used in space cameras. However, that did come with its own set of issues. CCDs require more power to function, and when storage space and weight is as restricted as it is on a space shuttle, this can be a problem. CMOs, on the other hand, use less power, but it results in more noise in pictures, which shows up as visual grain. NASA would approach Dr. Eric Fosium with a challenge: advance CCDs for use in outer space. This meant making them smaller, more energy efficient, and more radiation resistant. Dr. Fosium delivered, and this innovation would go on to change image capturing as we know it. He was able to combine the technology of the CCDs with that of CMOs, and this resulted in the camera on a chip, scientifically named CMO's Active Pixel Image Sensor, or CMO's APS for short. This created a scientific quality camera much smaller than anything that came before. The CMO's APS met all the criteria NASA had put forward, and then it would go on to revolutionize image capturing software on the earthly side. In fact, the camera on a chip technology is now used in more than 6 billion cameras produced every year. This, of course, also includes the one that you carry around in your pocket every day. Smartphones themselves wouldn't be permitted to be brought into space until 2026. The first time that smartphones were permitted to be on the International Space Station was with the SpaceX Crew 12 mission. Now with Artemis 2, we have had smartphones out in the moon's orbit. To bring it full circle, on April 3rd, 2026, NASA shared pictures of the Earth, taken through the window on a smartphone camera. All thanks to Dr. Fosium and the CMO's APS. So next time you take a picture on your phone, just remember, that camera came from space.
Keeping on the topic of space shuttles, the same technology that was invented to help protect space shuttles upon re-entering the atmosphere also protects your glasses now. The journey through the atmosphere is not an easy one. While it does inadvertently protect us from things like meteorites and asteroids, it makes the process of getting back to Earth from space to be a bit difficult. In fact, it makes it dangerous for astronauts returning to Earth.
Upon entering the mesosphere layer of our atmosphere, an object experiences ram pressure. This is more extreme for meteorites due to their speed. In terms of our atmosphere, the air particles are at their thickest when you get to the surface, which is the troposphere. This then causes the particles in front of an object to heat up even more due to compression.
Thankfully, NASA looked at this problem and decided, let's make it a bit safer. They created a process of coating the space shuttles in a layer of diamond-like carbon, or DLC for short. This diamond-like carbon protects against things like friction, air resistance, and wear resistance. This all makes it a lot easier for astronauts to return back to Earth. All of these are imperative in protecting space shuttles in all stages of its journey.
In 1988, Air Products and Chemicals Inc. received the license to manufacture the NASA-patented DLC process. Their sub-company Diamond X would use this license to create the Diamond Hard technology, which makes the surfaces of glasses 10 times more resistant to scratches than the non-coated glasses.
This technology was first used back on Earth in the Ray-Ban Diamond Hard lenses, but then it would be adapted for use on regular glasses. Now the same DLC coating that protects space shuttles protects your glasses against everyday wear and use. Keeping on the topic of headwear, do you wear headphones of any kind? If so, as you can probably guess by this point in the video, you have NASA to thank for that. In fact, NASA was crucial in the development of wireless headphone technology, although this did start with communication centers and not the headphones as you know them today. These first were developed for the Apollo missions. As you can imagine, when piloting a spacecraft, it's best to not be tied down by wires.
Before Apollo, there was the Mercury program. In the Mercury program, the goal was simple: put a man in a spaceflight orbit and return him to Earth safely afterwards. In the Mercury Atlas 6 mission, astronaut John Glenn orbited the Earth 3 times in just under 5 hours. This made him the first American to orbit the Earth.
In the Mercury era of the space program, the headphones were built into the helmet themselves, which would then be wired in the communication center on the dashboard. The communication center being wired into the helmet itself did cause some issues. When turning the head, the vision would sometimes be obscured. There's also the possibility that when turning your head, you might go out of line with the microphones built into the helmet. As you can imagine, this was an issue, but NASA would solve this issue in the Apollo missions. When making the new version of the spacesuit that would be worn both inside the spacecraft and outside, NASA created these wireless communication centers that would be housed entirely on the astronaut's head instead of on the helmet themselves. These, due to their black and white color, would be referred to affectionately as Snoopy caps.
These would be held in place under a black and white cap, housing 2 microphones and earpieces to better ensure communication in case one set failed. An elastic band was used to hold these caps firmly to the astronaut's head. These caps would also be nicknamed Snoopy caps for their resemblance of Snoopy from the Peanuts. Fun fact, Snoopy actually has a long-standing relationship with NASA. NASA actually made him the mascot of mission safety and success. And he has been to space on the Artemis 1 mission as a 0G indicator. These Snoopy caps would allow for a much better range of motion and visibility.
Unlike with the Mercury helmets, these would actually be worn on the moon as well. The Snoopy caps were quite reliable. Not only were they noise cancelling, but they were held to the head with an elastic band that would go around the chin. This gave the astronauts full range of mobility while on the moon. These were capable of long-range communication, which is great for when you're not actually in the rocket itself. You can go out on the moon, explore, gather samples, do all the research you need to do, and still be able to communicate with the staff back in Houston. The Snoopy cap played a critical role in the development of modern-day headphones, so if you wear wireless headphones, you have the Snoopy cap to thank for it. Unless you wear wired headphones. Those had their origins in the original telephone operators. This next contribution's point of origins actually comes from the astronaut's helmet itself. Oddly enough, though, the application of its origins exists on the other side of your body, on your feet. If you wear or are wearing athletic shoes right now, then there's a chance that their soles have their origins in an astronaut helmet. As mentioned previously, there's a lot of differences between the Mercury spacesuits and the Apollo spacesuits. In addition to the Snoopy caps, the spacesuits of the Apollo mission were designed to be lightweight, durable, and impact resistant, with the most important area for this innovation being the space helmet.
While protecting your noggin is always important, it is especially crucial when dealing with matters in space. This protection process was also used to protect components on the spacecraft. The process itself consisted of heating rubber, and then compressed air would be blown into it. As a result, a hollow yet flexible sealed pocket of air would form. As it turns out, this process appeared to have potential for use on Earth, and former NASA engineer Frank Rudy seemed to think so as well. He would then adapt this process, now known as blow rubber molding, to footwear. This resulted in durable cushions that wouldn't wear down like regular foam. This adaptation would go on to revolutionize the athletic footwear industry. In fact, it might be in the soles of your own athletic shoes right now. Frank Rudy wasn't just the guy behind any random athletic shoe either. Frank Rudy is actually the creator of Nike Airs, and to this day, this is seen as the most iconic of footwear cushioning technology. Even if you don't wear athletic shoes, there's still a high probability that the cushions you walk on come from NASA as well. In fact, you might even sleep on it. Memory foam also comes from NASA.
This next bit is just something I wanted to throw in as a little bonus. With the Artemis 2 mission, you might have seen the astronauts wearing these orange suits. And it might be a little confusing about why they're not wearing the white suits we typically know for astronauts. And that is because this orange suit is made for exiting the Earth's atmosphere and re-entering from space. The orange color is actually there to help with rescue in case something went wrong. The orange makes it easy to spot, and if something were to happen, wouldn't you want to be wearing something that's easy to spot opposed to the white that can be lost? It's not a contribution, but it's just something I wanted to explain, because when they do return to the moon with the Artemis 4 mission, they will be wearing a new version of the white suit. So how did all of this come to be? How does something go from being a technology meant for use in space to something used in everyday life here on Earth? That one has an easy answer. That's NASA Spinoff.
Despite the name, this isn't like a TV show spin-off where it's still technically connected to the main show, but its own thing. NASA Spinoff is an official sector in the main part of NASA, focused on developing commercial products and services. These spin-offs actually receive official NASA support in both funding and research. This isn't some new program either, as its roots date back to 1976. NASA also tends to partner with small businesses for these, which in turn gives them not only support, but a chance to grow.
While I only covered a handful of these spin-offs in this video, if you go to the NASA Spinoff website, there's a catalog of more than 2,000 patents that you can look through. For those of you who are curious, I will leave a link to that in the description below, and I'll also put its address on the screen now.
2026 is not only the year of the Artemis 2 mission, but but it's also the 50th anniversary of the NASA spinoff program. On the website, you can even sort it by state. So if there's a particular state you want to see the contributions of, you can do that. For example, my home state is Ohio. Not only can I see the list of what spin-offs have occurred here, such as a food supplement that reduces fat and improves flavor, or a laser image video camera that can see through fire, smoke, and fog, but if one catches my eye, I can actually click on it and read all about it for free. In the current day, it's very easy to get bogged down by what companies and other people are doing. People have personal agendas, and companies and brands incentivize their own profits, and it feels like everything you do has to be building up to something. When that's the current standard for living, it's always very refreshing to see organizations like NASA. I feel like I learn something new about NASA every day, and I have two great examples of this. For one, when I was in the process of recording this video, I found a NASA website where you can have the images of the Earth spell out any word you want. Here's my own name, from the Earth. And two, when I was refining the script for this video, I found out that you can view what NASA's Hubble and Webb telescopes are currently observing and what they've observed in the past, all for free. It's not only locked to just the moment, as you can change the dates, see the information summaries, and look around in an interactive way to see what discoveries there are. If you're anything like me, and I'm assuming you are because you're still watching the video, it's really cool to look through, and it's free. Not only is all of this accessible out there with just a little bit of discovery, it's all out there for free. As stated previously, NASA's motto is for the benefit of all, and that is a statement I feel they embody with every new detail I learn about them. It really incentivizes curiosity in my eyes. It is so demoralizing to be looking into something that you're very interested about and then getting hit with a paywall. So the fact that if you're looking into something NASA has done and then you will never hit that, that's great. That's great. I love that. I wish more organizations were like NASA. This video is actually a part of a bigger project of mine. Over the course of this project, I've had the opportunity to speak with a representative from NASA themselves. During our initial conversation, I brought up the topic of potential communication issues that NASA has. And I learned that due to how much there is to tell the public, NASA has a hard time getting it all out there in a shareable form. The sheer volume of what they have to share is just so vast, and this only applies to current discoveries, not at all the stuff we talked about today, like previous contributions. And as I'm putting an end to this video, this fact has just been on my mind. There's an entire world of information out there available for discovery on NASA's website if you're curious enough to go look. You never know what you're going to find if you choose to go investigate, and I think that's a wonderful thing. If you made it this far in the video, I just want to say thank you for watching. It really does mean a lot to me, and I would love to hear what you all have to say in the comments down below. Thank you for being here, and thank you to NASA for keeping everything available for free. Until next time, stay curious.